Hi, my name is Randy Fay. I'm rfay on Slack and Drupal.org and lots of places, and I'm the maintainer of the DDEV-Local project that DDEV, the company, supports. And I want to show you today one of the most exciting things to come in our local development world in some time, which is WSL2, the Windows Subsystem for Linux, version 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a computer that I have sadly taken all of my normal stuff off of. I have uninstalled Docker and I've uninstalled DDEV, and I've tried to make it as close as I can get to a clean system so that we can do an installation from scratch. So we're going to start from the very beginning and see how we do. Now, hopefully it's representative of what you might encounter when you are starting out doing things one at a time. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what DDEV-Local is. DDEV-Local is a Docker-based local development environment. It's aimed at web developers, especially PHP, but lots of JavaScript and HTML and whatever developers are good with it. It has explicit support for quite a number of frameworks and CMSs, including Typo3 and Drupal and Laravel and Magento, things like that. Basically, you run a website on your own local computer with almost no configuration of the computer. We're going to do a bit of work today, but this is just initial setup work for WSL2 mostly. And once we get done with this, everything is happening inside the containers. So developers can run multiple websites at the same time, all with different configurations, different PHP versions, different Nginx configurations, different Apache configurations, with no impact on the local computer. Composer's not installed on the local computer, PHP's not installed, Nginx is not installed. Now, because Docker does all the heavy lifting and all the configuration basically happens inside the Docker containers, you don't have even PHP or Composer. And DDEV-Local has had first-class Windows and macOS and Linux support for ages. The irony of what we're doing today is we're actually setting up Windows to run Linux. WSL2 is actually running Linux. So we will install once we get WSL2 installed, we'll basically be using the Linux installation techniques. Okay, so what is WSL2? As I said, it's the Windows Subsystem for Linux, version 2. It's a real Linux kernel and distributions built into the latest version of Windows that just came out this past spring. It's called the Spring 2004 edition. You do have to have that Spring 2004 or Spring 2020 or Windows 10 2004 edition to run it. It's an astonishing thing that Microsoft has brought Linux full-blown into the Windows world. And it's a wonderful thing that Docker Desktop for Windows does support WSL2 directly, and it's actually implemented in WSL2. So, and Docker said that's their path forward on Windows. So, okay, so there's advantages and disadvantages of everything. In this case, you can see there's more disadvantages on the right, but the disadvantages are little and the advantages are really, really big. So don't get thrown off by the counts. The advantages, Linux on your Windows machine. It's complete, it's fast, it's capable. You see that number one on the disadvantages is the same thing, but number two, it's amazingly fast web serving with DDEV-Local and Docker. And it's the future of Docker Desktop, so it's going with the flow, we can say. The disadvantages are that it's yet another different environment for everybody to remember, and we already have lots and lots of things to remember. It's also got context switches. If you're working in the Windows world and you're used to PowerShell, and all of a sudden you have to switch back and forth to the Bash in the WSL2 window, it's a whole different space and it's a different file system, which is important. We inside the WSL2 distro, we need to use the file system inside, not use the Windows file system, which you can reach, but you don't want to put your code there. And number 4, my favorite PHP storm is not completely ready for WSL2 yet, although they keep making strides. There are a couple of workarounds, and I'll have a link on the last slide of how different ways that you can run it. There's 2 completely different ways to run it, and you may be happy with one or both of them. And of course, it requires Windows 10 2004, which not every single person has yet. And Microsoft, while they're working hard on this, and they've done some amazing work, it's not fully polished. They have some great plans. There's all kinds of things in the pipeline. You keep seeing news articles, but it's not fully polished. But it is great. Okay, here's what we're going to do the installation. We're going to make sure that we have the right version, and then we're going to install Chocolati, and then we're going to install MakeCert. So then we've got a few things. We're going to go along just a little ways along. So let's go back here, and I'm going to run WinVer to see what we've got. And I have Windows version 2004. So that's okay. We got that. Check. By the way, I'm using the slides here to point out what I'm doing. But what we're doing is we're going through these instructions, which are on the main page of ddev.readthedocs.io, where the docs are. That's just what we're doing. So we're going right along here, installation or upgrade Windows WSL2. So we're going right through these. It's actually 20 steps to get everything installed. You don't have to do all of them, and you may know other ways. That there's more than one way to do these things. I'm going to show you what I think is the most straight line way. So, okay, so we are going to install Chocolati. Chocolati is the fastest and best way to get new packages on Windows. Microsoft has just announced that they're going to have one, but I'm going to open an administrative PowerShell here, and I'm just going to paste this magic formula to get Chocolati installed. Again, you can install things lots of ways, and you don't have to install it this way, but that's the way we're going to do it today. Okay, now I'm going to choco install. Let me follow the rules here. We're going to choco install -y MakeCert, and then we're going to install MakeCert. MakeCert is a wonderful tool that allows you to create a certificate authority so that your browser can trust certificates that are created by your local development server. And that's about all you need to know. Once you've got it installed, everything just works. So I'm going to do a MakeCert-install, and it pops up the window that says, yeah, are you sure you want to do that? Because you're saying that you're going to trust a whole new set of certificates, which is a great thing for local development because we can use HTTPS all the time, which is where we're deploying. So we want to be using HTTPS locally and not clicking through the ugly little, this is an insecure site, click around. Okay, there we've done the first set of things that we're going to do. Now we have to set a couple of environment variables so that we can, just so that the WSL2 side is going to know what's going on. So let's do that. We're going to set this CA root. Here we are. This is the magic here. And this sets, so when we get WSL2 installed, it's going to make it so that our MakeCert is trusted there as well. This again is a one-time operation. So here I'm pasting it. And now we're going to enable WSL2. And when I do this, it's going to reboot, and I'm going to have to come back to where we are. Okay, here we're going to enable. Okay, well, I rebooted and I came back up and hopefully I got my Windows set up correctly again. And we have enabled WSL2. Now that's a feature in Windows, but now we have to go and download and install the WSL2 kernel. This is an awkward little bit that happened late in the development cycle for this version. It's not hard, but it's awkward, and they've said that it's not going to happen in the future. But for right now, we have to go and download the kernel and install it separately. Like I say, it's very easy, and that was all it took. But again, it's a little awkward. Now we need to set the default version of, oops, we need to set the default version of machines that we create to version 2. Version 2 is what everybody would want, and I don't know why they didn't change that with this version. They say in future versions it's going to be set default version 2. Okay, they say that in the next release of Windows it will be by default version 2, which is what it should be, of course. So we downloaded the kernel, set the default version. Now let's go get Ubuntu from the Microsoft Store. This will work with, you can do what we're doing with many different distributions of Linux, but I recommend that you start with Ubuntu unless you have some reason to do otherwise. It's the most widely supported Linux variant out there, and that's the easiest way to start. So we're in the Microsoft Store. You see that there's 3 things that pop up right away. Ubuntu is actually 20.04. Then there's a separate one that's 20.04. And then there's 18.04. I'm just going to go with Ubuntu because it's easier to type. So we're going to install that. They pop up. They normally pop up this annoying login window. Maybe I'm logged in on this computer, but they normally pop up this annoying login window, and you don't have to log into it. You can just click the X and it'll go on and it'll download this. Okay, now we're going to launch it, and it takes a minute to initialize it. And there we are, we have it. We have Ubuntu 20.04 running in Windows. So let's take a look at the next step. WSL, this says that WSL-L-V will show 3 distros, but it won't because we haven't installed Docker Desktop yet. So we're going to go back to our PowerShell and we're going to install Docker Desktop. Now you can install Docker Desktop by just searching for it and downloading it. That's fine. It's the stable version we're using. I just find Chocolatey to be a very excellent way to do it. So it's my preference, and there's many ways to install Docker. Okay, Docker's installed, but we still have to run it. So let's run it. You see the little whale here is breathing, trying to get air. And it's got air now, so now Docker Desktop is running and it says we can do stuff with it. That came up really quite amazingly fast. It pops up this window, like an introductory tutorial window. You don't need to log in. You can see that I am logged in, but you don't need to log in. So we're going to close that. And now I'm going to do a WSL-L-V, and you see we have three three distros running. One is Ubuntu, the one that we installed. It's the default. That's what the star means there. And they're all version 2. Docker Desktop and Docker Desktop Data are private to Docker, and we don't need to go in there or worry about that. Okay. We've got Docker Desktop running. We've got our distros running, and we're ready to start installing DDEV-Local at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to install Homebrew. Homebrew is a wonderful package manager for both Mac OS and Linux. And it's the easiest way to install DDEV and to keep it up to date. If you look at the docs, you'll see several different ways to do that. This isn't the only way you can do it, but it's my preference. And I'm doing the screencast. So here we go. I'm going to go to brew.sh, and here's the formula. This formula is the same on Mac OS as it is on Linux. Oh, and I need to switch to our Ubuntu window to run this. I'm going to pin that here while we're here so I can find it when I need it. Okay. There it is. And I'm going to install it in the recommended place, which is home Linux brew.linuxbrew. And here it goes installing. Okay, there it is. We have it installed. But notice that we have some next steps that we need to do. We have to add Homebrew to our path. So we need to do that before we go any farther. I'm just going to tell it to put that there and add it to my profile. And I can add it immediately to my path with this technique here. Or I could have sourced the other. They recommend that we install GCC, so we'll just go ahead and install it right now. Now we've got brew in our path, and we're going to do a brew install GCC. And it failed, so we'll do it again, see what happens. I think that failure must be a temporary bug in the Homebrew package for GCC, because I saw that the other day, and just redoing it works, so something must be out of order there. Let's take a look at what comes next. We're going to install DDEV-Local. So we're going to brew install. We're going to brew tap drud DDEV, and brew install DDEV. Okay, there it is all installed. I'm going to make this print a little bit bigger while we're here. Make these fonts a little bit bigger. Okay, now we have DDEV installed, and we can see what version it is. And we can type DDEV, and it'll show us the commands that we have available here. Let me just make this full screen. We can see all the commands. Okay. Now what we're going to do, there's one other thing that I always do at this point that I'm going to do right here. I'm going to brew install bash completion. I use bash completions all the time, and DDEV supports them. So you can type DDEV, and then you can hit tab, and it'll show you what the possible commands are. So let's just get that installed. It's easy and it's quick. Now if I type DDEV L, for example, and hit tab, oh, sorry, we have to install it. We have to add it to our path. We have to add this line to our bash profile. I'm going to add it to our profile. And now I'm going to source that, which is what happens when we start the thing in the first place. And now when so many things that you want to use, you can't remember all of the command line arguments that you have. Now, theoretically, if I type DDEV L and hit tab, then I see the commands that begin with L. Or if I hit DDEV and hit tab, I can see all the commands that are available to me. And I just find that very addictive. So I'm glad we got that installed right quick. Okay, now we're here for what we need to be here. We're going to create a junk project, and then we're going to create a typo 3 project, and then we're going to take a look at some of these other things. So we have DDEV installed now. So here we've done our Homebrew install, our bash completion. Oh, by the way, if you're running ZSH, which works great, you can use ZSH completion, and DDEV supports those too. And fish, if you use fish, it supports fish. Okay, installed. Now we're going to do a junk project. This is just to show you how simple the actual process is. So what I'm going to do, I want to point out something really important. You see I'm in /home/rfay. This is the file system of the WSL2 distribution. If you notice, I can go to /mount/c/users/ I think it's Randy on this machine. I could put my stuff over on the C drive, and I have full access to that here. But if you do that, your performance is terrible, and you wasted your time with WSL2 in the first place. Even though it would be most convenient to have that consolidated file system, it's not a consolidated file system, and you want to do it in the WSL2 file system. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a simple index. We're going to call this a simple PHP project. You got to get it right though. So now I have a simple PHP project. It's just one file, but that's what it is. Now I'm going to do a DDEV config, and the project name comes by default from the folder name. I recommend that you always have your projects be the same as your folder name, although you can do otherwise. The doc root is the current directory. That's where the index.php is. And DDEV supports a whole bunch of different project types, including WordPress and Magento and Drupal and Laravel and Backdrop, Typo 3. But this is the generic one. PHP is the generic PHP project type. So there we are. Now we're going to do a DDEV start. And it failed because it says Docker isn't running. So I tell you what happened here. This might happen to you. So we had this WSL2 running before we got Docker going, and Docker's in charge of putting that in there. So let's go ahead, and we need to get Docker running. Thought I would have demonstrated that along the way here. So I'm going to kill this window, and I'm going to run it again. And it's getting all those bash completions in there. And now if I do docker ps, it's working fine. I just had to launch Ubuntu after Docker was installed, and I hadn't done that. So here I am in junk. Docker's working now. I do a DDEV start, and it's going to ask if I want to send usage information. This helps us a lot if you do it. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. Now notice it has to pull the Docker images. This is a one-time thing. It has to pull the Docker images on the first project. And since we're doing it from scratch, we get to do this. And there it is. We've got it all set up, and we have a URL that we can go to that will give us our site. So let's just bring up the browser here. And junk.ddev.site is right there waiting for us. See how fast and responsive that was. It shows this connection is secure. We're using HTTPS, and the browser trusts it. And here's all the information about what we're running. So that's good. I did want to show you one other thing that I skipped. We needed to apt-get install. Maybe I left it out of the presentation here. Let's just go get that and install it. It's optional, but it makes DDEV launch work, which is really nice. So it's just a package called XDG utils. So we are going to just go ahead and install that in our WSL2. Okay, there it is, it's done. And now with that done, I can do a DDEV launch. One of my favorite things. I can do a DDEV launch and it'll just bring that right up. It's the same as copying and pasting this thing, but it's nicer. And it's got a couple other features too. DDEV launch -m will get you the Mailhog interface. And Mailhog is a very nice tool that lets you see emails that have been captured, because all emails in your project get captured, so they don't escape, but you can view them. And DDEV launch -p launches the PHP MyAdmin interface, which lots of people love. There's many ways to work with databases in DDEV, and PHP MyAdmin isn't my favorite, but lots of people have used it and they like it, and so there it is. Okay, so there we did our first simple project. We created an index.php, we did a DDEV config and followed the prompts, and then we did a DDEV start, and then we did a DDEV launch. And we could have just pasted the URL and it'd be the same. So there's our first project we've done. So that's how simple it is to do a project. But now we're going to do one that's a little more complex. We're going to do a typo 3 project, and we're going to configure it with flags instead of with the prompted DDEV config, and then we're going to use DDEV Composer Create to create it. So we're basically using the same process, but doing something slightly fancier. So DDEV config --project type equals typo3 --doc root equals public, which is what's usually used in a typo 3 build, --create doc root. So there it is, it's all set up. And now we're going to do the DDEV Composer Create typo 3 CMS based distribution. I'll make sure I got it right here. CMS based distribution --10 and --prefer dist. So there we are, and that's actually going to run Composer inside the web container after it starts it up. Actually, I'm going to do the start first. DDEV Composer Create will start for us automatically, but we might as well see the start happen here. So there it is, it started it. We can already visit it, but it doesn't have the code there that it needs because we haven't built it yet with DDEV Composer. So let's go ahead and do that build, and it's going to blow away everything in this directory. So it's warning us that our directory that we're supposed to be working in here will be deleted. So that's good. Okay, there it is. Typo 3 is all installed. We have all of the Typo 3 files that have been created with the Composer build. We are going to touch public first install, because that's what Typo 3 wants us to do when we're actually doing an install. And we'll do a DDEV launch. Here it is, it's checked our environment, and I'm just going to say continue on, and the username admin, and we've got a new site, and I'll tell it to create an empty start page and go to the back end. Okay, here it is. Here's all of the back end for configuring a Typo 3 site. It's all working, it's all snappy, and it's a good thing. So that is a Typo 3 build and install. Of course, when you have a project, you'll probably check out the project. You'll probably then do a DDEV Composer install. Then you'll probably grab a database from an upstream project and install it. So we'll take a look at some of those options here. So we've created a Typo 3 project now and a junk project. And now I just want to show you a couple of other important commands. So here we are back in our Ubuntu world. And first of all, I want to make sure that you know that you can just type DDEV and you'll see all the commands. So there they are with a short description. And you can also say DDEV help and the name of the command. And you'll get a full description of what it's for, the usage, and some examples of how to use it, and flags that you can add to it. So, for example, I always, you can actually type DDEV import DB and it'll prompt you on what you want to import. I never do that. I do DDEV import DB -- source equals something. So right now I want to DDEV list, and we don't need much help for DDEV list. Oh, look I didn't clean up my old projects. That's the one thing I forgot to do. I'm going to get rid of them so they're not in the way. DDEV stop -- oh, here, DDEV help stop. It says unlist. You can remove the project from the global project list. In this case, I deleted everything off of this computer, but I forgot to delete the global project list. So if I do a DDEV list, I could do a DDEV stop -- unlist in DHC2, D8 Composer, Laravel backpack, I can't type it all. Okay, now I just have the two things running that we just did, just those two. And if I wanted to do a DDEV help list, then it would say you can show only active projects, you can have it continuously show you, and you can get JSON output from it. You can do that from any command. It's pretty useful, but we won't go into that here. Okay, so normally you're going to be getting probably a database from upstream, and you're going to want to import it. In our case, we have a database running. In fact, I can say DDEV MySQL and do show tables, and there it is. But I'm going to DDEV export DB -- file equals .tarballs db.sql.gz. Just a file name. It does use gzip by default, So we're going to export the database that we're currently using, and it did it right quick. And now, so let's assume that I was getting that database from upstream from my production site. I would do a DDEV import db-s source equals .tarballs db.sql.gz, and it would import it for me right there. So there we are, and we have imported it. So let's see, what other commands did I want to show you? That's it. Oh, DDEV power off. You need to know about DDEV power off. It's just the quickest way to stop all projects and any containers that you have running. It's just a lovely and delightful way to go. Okay, here's resources for you to go on and you're learning about DDEV. The docs are at ddev.readthedocs.io. Don't forget about ddev.com. DDEV-Local has been sponsored by ddev.com for more than 3 years, which is an amazing commitment to the open source community. And do try out their DDEV Live for hosting. There's a free 10-day trial that you can try out and kick the tires, and we'd love to hear from you. The WSL2 installation docs are right there, really on the front page of readthedocs.io, ddev.readthedocs.io. And we have loads of support, got a bunch of great communities for support. The Drupal and Typo3 Slacks, there's a pound DDEV channel. Gitter has a pound DDEV channel. I think it's pound drud/DDEV. And Stack Overflow and the DDEV-Local issue queue. All of those there. We're happy to see you, happy to hear from you, and happy to help you out, and happy to hear your feedback. And of course, the project repo is github.com/drud/DDEV. And I promised you about PHP Storm. PHP Storm is gradually maturing to work with WSL2. There's 2 different ways to do it, and I have a blog post that you can go to so you can see that. Thank you for coming. Thank you for wading through all this with me. I think you'll find it easier done than said, because we did start from the very beginning, but it all works. It's a lot of steps because everything's maturing, but it's good stuff. So thank you for coming, and look forward to talking to you next time.